Welcome, everybody. So welcome to the Institute of Design and welcome to the Sustainable Solution Workshop. This is the final event of our class. For those who are online and watching our streaming, I'm Carlos Teixeira. I'm a faculty member here at the Institute of Design and also the director of the PhD program. And I co-teach this class with Dia Bataine, that is also a PhD researcher here at the Institute of Design. Dia will take now and do the introduction about the course and the projects, and then we're going to have the final presentations. So, Dia?
Thank you, Carlos.
Take from here.
Again, hello everyone. Welcome to our event, Designing Everyday Infrastructures. And today we're going to discuss two projects, Embedded Finance and Inflight meals. And I would like to also thank and welcome everyone joining us online from around the world. And again, as Carlos said, I'm co-teaching the class of Sustainable Solution Workshop. And again, thanks for joining us as we explore how designing for sustainable, equitable intelligence and investable infrastructure in food systems and in financial systems. Both projects are looking at envisioning choices at the intersection of multiple systems on multiple levels with multiple stakeholders through multiple intelligence. The Inflight Meals project sits at the nexus of urban development, food, and mobility. It delves also into the innovative integration of Inflight Meals within the broader context of sustainable cities. The project leverages sustainable practices such as vertical farming alongside AI and data analytics to revolutionize food sourcing, preparation and delivery in air travel. This project seeks to not only enhance the passenger experience, but also to contribute significantly to local economies, reduce environmental impacts, and ensure equitable access to nutritious food. As well, we will delve into the evolving landscape of embedded finance for cashless society. And its potential to transform economic activities into a seamless experience. This project explores how we can leverage technology to move to a cashless society that embodies sustainability, equity, intelligence, and investment potential. We will navigate through the complexity of embedded finance, envisioning a future where financial systems are not only tools for transaction, but catalysts for equitable and societal progress. Finally, I would also like to thank our collaborators and those who have contributed to the success of the project and the class, and our core partners, Credit Corp, represented through Mariella. They're joining us online, and Invert Chicago, represented through Isaac and Alberto. Thanks for your support. And I would like to also thank Rick Edinburgh for his endless support throughout the whole semester with us. Also our esteemed guest speakers, industry experts and panelists we have. They have been very generous with their time, effort, and knowledge. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce now the embedded finance team. I think Sanya and Avani, if you could please join me here. Can we give them a round of applause?
Hello everyone. Welcome to our presentation on embedded finance. And the 5 people who were in this team were Michael, June, Grace, Sanya, and I. So I'll take you through the equitable solutions for embedded finance, which is about, we looked into the vast potential of embedded finance, focusing on its ability to improve the banking services of today. We were looking at creating or designing an infrastructure that is equitable and sustainable. We further identified embedded finance emerges as a viable replacement for public infrastructures, ushering in a transformative shift in the private sector towards serving public needs. We were imagining a future of inclusive financial services. The 3 things we needed to achieve our goal to build an inclusive future was prompted by the questions, how might we enhance community capabilities and build a new institutional trust by providing financial resources for equitable economic participation? Second, how can we transform financial services into engines of empowerment for underserved communities, ensuring not just access but true financial agency? Third, how can we creatively leverage financial inclusion initiatives to foster a sense of understanding and trust within underserved communities? So we were looking through our research and our daily understanding, we realized we are transitioning towards a cashless economy. This is not only streamlining transaction, but reduces the risk of fraud. This widespread integration of embedded finance means that financial instruments will become ubiquitous, yet many individuals may struggle to fully comprehend their intricacies due to the limited awareness and education. This further leads us into the challenges of transitioning to a cashless society. One of them being financial literacy, which I talked about, and then digital divide. Demographics lack access to the technology, limited financial literacy, and fear of privacy, which may deter some individuals from embracing cashless methods. And cultural and generational factors also play a role. Traditional members of the community don't want to switch into a cashless society altogether. And in rural or unprivileged areas, may struggle to afford and implement the necessary technology for cashless transactions. Risk of excluding marginalized groups also who rely heavily on cash is seen here.
That helped us identify the cycle that we were aiming to break. Currently, there's an infrastructure disparity, which means that people lack access to infrastructure. Ultimately, this means that the community's economic growth is stunted. The communities aren't able to develop, and this means that there's a systemic socialized marginalization that continues to happen. Ultimately, this leads to entrenched financial inclusion. This means that people aren't able to access the financial services that would help them grow and further themselves. This also helped us identify different hotspots in the system that we think could be ripe for intervention. There's community development. Can we help communities develop? Can we help them also become financially literate and bridge that gap? There's also the issue of unrecognized identity. People that don't have formalized identifications cannot enter financial institutions. And this ultimately leads to a lack of trust, which makes it another great intervention point. But ultimately, it all came down to the access of infrastructures. If you're not able to access these infrastructures, how can we break the cycle?
So to build these investable infrastructures to build as fixed assets that can generate contracts and cash flows for multiple years is by creating access and inclusive services for the society and communities which we are working for. So this was driven by some of our system goals. One of being accessibility, which is easily accessible, and particularly those from the underserved and remote communities. Inclusivity, consider the diverse needs of multiple stakeholders. Financial literacy, increasing financial knowledge to the underserved and the underbanked areas to increase their economic resilience, which is creating robust financial services that are capable to withstand and adapt to the disruptions. And then finally, intelligent data utilization to solve the challenges in a cashless society, which are driven by the values of sustainability, community centricity, empowerment, equity, and cultivating trust. So, so we are envisioning a future where embedded finance seamlessly fosters sustainability, equity, and digital advancement, all while meeting the diverse needs of its local communities. So embedding intelligence for equitable finance. The considerations we took to understand the future state from the desired state. Some of them are systemic exclusion, which caters to the established financially secure groups, frequently neglecting underserved communities, to a reimagined financial ecosystem that is tailored to the unique needs of the underserved communities to foster sustainable participation and inclusion. And then concentrated wealth, which is often marginalized underserved communities and focus on immediate financial aid, which fails to promote long-term security and empowerment. And then community-driven financial services, which aspires to create a sustainable future through empowerment. Finally, a highly regulated financial autonomy, which has systemic barriers that exacerbate financial literacy to a financial empowered state which is widely accessible, and there's established trust between the communities and the banking institutions.
Ultimately, these desired states helped us envision the archetypes that would help us build this. Our first one being enabling financial agency. The current system only helps the privileged further grow and leaves behind those that are marginalized. We're looking at reimagining the financial ecosystem to make sure the underserved communities are also able to participate. Our approach looks at bridging the gap between financial services and the needs of these marginalized communities. We want to make sure it's community-centric and embedded into their daily lives where they can use it as and when they need it. And lastly, this will help make it inclusive and accessible. Our first feature under this archetype is on-demand nano loans. How can we help, how can short-term borrowings contribute to long-term financial stability? The current roadblock we're seeing is that marginalized communities fall prey to predatory lenders, trapping them in a cycle of debt. Our feature here looks at it's designed specifically for small purchases. These loans would be tailored to the cost of essential items and can be requested in real time. Essentially, this could look like you're at the billing counter making a purchase and you need a really quick loan to maybe pay for certain essential item. So we're helping individuals be able to access what they need when they need it. But we're also making sure we're considering infrastructures that can promote verification and potential risk management considerations. Our next feature is Safe to Spend. This talks about how we can embed opportunities to build sustainable economic behaviors. Currently, many individuals face challenges in initiating and maintaining effective saving habits. Our feature Safe to Spend looks at using real-time geolocation to prompt personalized saving recommendations that are aligned with users' goals. This could look like if you're in a high-spend area where you're spending on non-essential items, you could be prompted to save a percentage of what you could potentially spend. This means that users can make better spending decisions while continuing to make sustainable saving habits. And our last feature under this archetype is community-supported profiling. Currently, traditional credit profiles exclude and disproportionately affect those that are marginalized. They consider factors like how much your previous loan was, did you pay it in time? But what about the communities that haven't had the credit history? How can we relook at what credit profiles are? Our feature here looks at redefining creditworthiness. This could be based on social cachet. Maybe it's based on how many family members that are banked, and that would help determine behavioral aspects of your creditworthiness. This would ultimately lead to increased access and help those that haven't had traditional credit history build on and finally be able to participate in the ecosystem. And lastly, we would leverage data partners that would support some of the data collection needs to maintain a proficient risk management system.
So then we moved into our second archetype, which is about redistributing capital. And it's about redistributing capital, where we are fostering shared power and prosperity. And if we see the current ecosystems, the capital flow is archaic and hasn't seen much of a change and ingrains existing issues. So our intent with this archetype was to reimagine the capital flow to support communities through services which are community driven and the practices which are community centric. The first feature, sorry. Sorry for the technical issues, guys.
Sorry, just a second.
So with this feature from the redistributed capital archetype, we are trying to look at how can we generate co-benefits from shared aspirations. And if we see the current states, it lacks the resources and expertise necessary to effectively navigate the complex financial systems. This feature looks at embarking on an entrepreneurial journey, which is so overwhelming, especially when confronted with alone. So this feature looks at catalyzing local economies by strengthening and supporting local businesses. With this feature, we are trying to look into how the smaller local businesses could be uplifted through first onboarding agents, that is, decentralized. They can go to their agents and can do this, have other people with the similar concepts, and then move into a growing economy where they can access resources, share resources for a gateway to knowledge and growth, and finally, where they can retain their businesses through insight network engines. The second feature under this is crowdfunding platforms, which would drive community growth by incentivizing profitable local investments. The traditional flow of capital hinders community development. And to redirect the flow of capital from government-driven to a public-driven system, we were looking at tax incentives and regulatory shifts, moving into to generate sustainable jobs and promote local growth through disposable income and private investments. Where, for example, a renewable source energy project could be funded through the community partners, and they could earn their return on investments as well, plus help the community to build further to move into a better society and is inclusive at the same time.
And last archetype is democratizing access. Here we're looking at building alternative pathways to inclusive financial engagement and empowerment. Currently, financial services limit accessibility, which means that there are uneven resource distributions, strict identity checks. What this does is it historically has marginalized many communities and most importantly, has limited communities from furthering their financial literacy. Our intent with democratizing access is to embed finance into a tool for social equity. We want to enhance the trust between the communities and financial services, all while making sure that not only they're accessible and equitable, but they also can enter the system confidently, needing the knowledge they need. Our first archetype for this solution is alternative identification cards. How can accessible finance-based data change communities' relationship to finance? Currently, official IDs are the gateway to accessing financial services, and several communities don't have access to these official government IDs because they need strenuous, intense documentation. What this does is it excludes them, and this isn't just for the unbanked population. This could even be scaled to refugees, where we see the same issue. Here, a feature to address this is an alternative identification card that considers non-traditional data points. The way we're envisioning this would be localized, where hyper-local stores could serve as identification gateways and would be supported by local champions. Seeing a representative from your community there would boost confidence in the financial system and help onboard you onto the process. We're looking at non-traditional data points that can help with verification. Maybe it's a text message, maybe it's your address, things that might be beyond just official government documentation. Our next feature is adapted DeFi. Adapted DeFi, which is decentralized finance. How can decentralized finance transform the way people interact with traditional financial services? Some of the roadblocks we see here are stringent regulatory compliances and the need for robust data security. Our feature here reimagines this, where DeFi not only allows anyone with internet to utilize these tools, but also significantly reduces the cost and dependency on these intermediaries. It's really a way to bring together some of the features we've spoken about, whether it be safe to spend, the nano loans feature, or even these identification gateways. This could be a way where it's all brought together. Our next idea is banking on wheels. How can embedded finance forge deeper relationships and drive community empowerment and engagement? Marginalized communities struggle with navigating urban complex infrastructures, and this can seem extremely intimidating. Can we bring banks to these communities instead? Not only would this help build trust, but foster communities and engagement to ultimately boost economic resilience. It would be beyond just a tool for financial transactions, but also help with financial literacy and almost act as a library of tools that they can access when they need. Next, we have digital twins. This one explores how virtual practices can pave the way for real-world financial empowerment. Currently, digital twins are used on a much larger scale with organizations, but we're looking at re-envisioning this on a more individual scale. Can we help users gain trust into the banking system and learn in a risk-free environment such that it helps them build confidence in the financial services they could receive while also navigating a complex system? This approach will ultimately help us promote financial practices, trust, and inclusivity in the financial education sector. Together, what this helps us do is it helps us with community outreach and tackle the issue of limited access. It helps us get rid of the deep-seated distrust in financial services, especially for the marginalized communities, because now we're looking at co-creating financial services that cater to exactly what they need. It helps us get rid of these outdated financial mindsets and move into a risk-free financial literacy mindset, all while still having the confidence you need to navigate this complex system. And lastly, when we're talking of financial institutions, there are a lot of community blind spots, not being embedded in the community and not having interacted with these participants before. This digital twin could help us create identities for a larger community and help banks cater better services. So now that we've walked through all of these different features and all these different archetypes, how does it all come together? We're looking at creating a flourishing, equitable financial future. This means that it's inclusive and helps increase access, personalization, and transparency, all while making sure we're fostering trust through these investable infrastructures. We're doing this through three archetypes. We have redistributing capital, which helps build economies. We have enabling a financial agency, which helps bridge the gap between what the current services are and what the needs of the communities are to ultimately boost economic resilience. And lastly, democratizing access, which ensures not only that the pathways to access these are inclusive, but also make sure that you can do it confidently. It is important to address the role that data has to play in these archetypes and the future that we're trying to create. Data through these different resources and features helps provide a source of critical intelligence for financial leaders to leverage and build a more equitable financial future. This means we can harness the different intelligences that these different features provide. So whether be it risk profile data and features and data that come out of that, or personal financial data which can help with spending patterns, or social dynamic and community data which can help us understand community needs, and lastly, capital flow patterns that can help us understand these social connections and cultural setting. Ultimately, they all come together to help build the vision that we're envisioning. But it's important to also highlight that the risk of this data, if not used correctly, could go ahead and reinforce the historical, capital-driven, and exclusionary practices of the past. So for us, it's extremely important to reconsider how the data we collect will be treated.
So as we move towards a cashless society, systems must consider how to be of service to all the communities and not repeat the past patterns in order to create sustainable infrastructures. And we will thank our partners to be a part of this project who brought about talking about Peru and understanding the landscape over there and bringing an inclusive lens to banking institutions, to Credit Corp and BCP. So if there are any questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amaya and Sania. I think we will take the Q&A after we do the Inflight meeting. So I'd like to welcome Jackson and Maddie to review the Inflight meeting project.
This is a start. Yeah, okay, so hi, good afternoon. We're the Inflight Meals group. So I'm Maddie. This is Benedicta, and our two other group mates, G1 and Nafisa. Wave. So before we begin, before we dive into all the heavy stuff, we want to do like just a quick trivia to just bring you to the mindset of where you guys want to be. So for my purposes, I'm gonna choose the categories, you just answer. So for the eggs, the question is like, what is the average age in days of an egg before it reaches store shelves? Like, just throw a ballpark number. Please answer in days.
20.
Okay.
60.
Okay.
30.
Okay, we average it to 45. We average it to 45. And research shows that, I mean, the 60 and 30 days are true, but yeah, we just average it. So that means the fresh eggs we get from supermarkets are actually already like 2 months old, but then like any other government entity, they said like, oh, that's safe as long as it's refrigerated. So next trivia, in the dumps. So around 133 billion pounds of food is wasted annually in the United States. This amount of wasted food can fill how many NFL stadiums? It doesn't amount, it's like, how many NFL teams are there? 32? It's not more, I'm gonna give you a tip, it's more than 32. Throw a ballpark number. 45, not 45 now, it's 90. Yeah, so, and with this amount, like, in-flight meal generates more than like $4 billion worth of it. And IATA is expecting for this number to be doubled in 6 years by 2030. And our last one is on the road. Like the average fresh produce item in the US travels around blank miles from farm to consumer. It's a lot of miles. Like, give me a number.
3,000.
Like that's not a lot of miles.
200 miles?
Okay.
1,000?
Oh, okay. Moving on. It's 1,500 miles. Yeah. So recent. Yeah. So this is the research that shows it, and then the concept of food miles was recognized during the 1990s to warn consumers of the connection between the long distances that the farm to consumer is already having. And what all of these show are flaws of the food system that we currently have, and it's clear that the food system is in need of a serious reevaluation. And we're trying to look at in-flight meals to be our agent of this change, because I mean, in-flight meals hasn't really, the demand has always been there, but even though that we're looking at this and this has like the greatest potential to breaking the current food system, there's a big challenge of breakthrough because of its outdated practices. Like the last known innovation for the in-flight meal experience is in the 1950s, ever since it was born in 1919. So we were looking at, well, upon like this whole semester, while generating our prototypes, we kind of ended up with like this consortium of stakeholders to help us move forward in-flight meals. My English was not Englishing, sorry. To move in-flight meals forward. So we were looking at airports because I mean, that's where in-flight meals live, more or less. Real estate developers, because we believe that they can provide us the investable infrastructure that we need in order to move this forward. And the local economy, because we're not just looking at the in-flight meal system, but we're looking also like how can this benefit the local economy as a bigger thing. So in the whole in-flight meal journey, we identified some key leverage points in that big system where we believe it's going to make the most impact and change in the bigger system. And those points are through strategic sourcing, customer experience, the logistic and distribution of it, and the waste management.
Thank you, Maddie. I'm gonna take over from here. So just to reiterate what Maddie just went through is that there's so much wrong with our current food systems, right? And where do we even start to change the system? Where do we start to nudge, or at what point do we leverage to make sure that we are solutionizing to solve some of the problems that the current food system has? For us, we believe that the in-flight meal, solving for the in-flight meal experience or all the challenges in there would enable us create a module that works, to be able to test it, to be able to make sure that it works, and then have it expand that to other industries outside of the in-flight meal experience. When we did this work, we had 9 different areas that we could nudge in the whole system, but we are not going to touch on all 9. We are going to limit ourselves to 4 key areas that we think is the right way to nudge to be able to solve for these challenges in the system. And so, again, we're going to talk about strategic sourcing and some of the features that we brainstormed around or reimagined. We're going to talk about the human experience and how that features, how to reimagine that whole experience that people have when interacting with food systems, logistics and distribution, and then, of course, waste management. Okay, so with strategic sourcing, we are looking at unlocking the potential of circular economies and distributed food systems through real estate infrastructural development. And for that, before I even get into the features of that, and what we imagine. I'm just going to show you what the food system of the future looks like. So currently what happens is when you, it's the food system of today is very linear. You have the farms that will grow the food that is sent to the distributors, and then the distributors will supply to any institutional organization, whether it's Inflight meal catering services, hospitals, or school, or whatever it is. But we imagine something very different for what the food system of the future is going to look like, which is very circular. It means that wherever food starts would eventually end up back at that same spot. So it's like circular in terms of waste and how waste is gathered. It's also distributed in that you don't have large distributors collecting or sourcing from all the farms and then keeping in one big system, right? Or one big distributed, in one big fulfillment center. You're going to have more like modular infrastructure, more like modular distribution or fulfillment centers in around the city space. And then you're also going to have it to be scalable, easily scalable, and then efficient and data-driven. One more thing I would point out is that currently most of the food that we have are grown on farms, but the food system of tomorrow or the food system of the future is going to have more multiple sources of food. So you'd have lab-grown meals. You'd also have things like urban farming and then vertical farming integrated into how we source our meals. So that's just for context. So some of the features that we decided to think about in terms of reimagining what the in-flight meal experience could be, especially given the context of real estate infrastructural development, are thinking around current agricultural technologies. And so we talked about lab-grown food and sourcing. We talked about controlled environmental agriculture, which is very similar to basically the image that you see here, where things are grown in-house or within like a walled structure. We talk about cellular agriculture and regenerative agriculture, amongst other forms of agricultural biotechnology as a particular feature and how we integrate it into the system. We also looked at optimized food production, especially in ghost kitchens. I mentioned how the food system of the future is going to be very distributed. And so how do we create distributed production houses for these to support the food system of the future? And so one of the concepts that we did explore was the concept of ghost kitchens. And for that, some of the strategies, especially because we are thinking about how implementation is going to look like, is long-term, short-term, and then medium-term. Short-term, we're thinking about real estate infrastructure development in terms of repurposing existing buildings or designing new ones to accommodate urban farm, vertical farming facilities, food processing centers, and then micro-fulfillment centers. In the short term, the long-term wise, you're looking at fostering local partnerships, because that is a key ingredient in terms of when we talk about sustainability. And one of the things that we're even trying to define for ourselves in terms of sustainability is that sustainability can be people, profit, planet. And so we talk about the planet when we talk about sustainability in this context, but how do we support the people in the system and make sure that they are not being left out, right? So we talk about equity and inclusivity as well. And then long term, we talk about investing in urban agricultural technologies. For the customer experience, we try to reimagine what that entire in-flight meal experience could look like, but also prioritizing sustainability in the process, right? So how do you make it equitable but also inclusive? And for us, we're looking at choice infrastructure, where we are hoping that by giving customers the opportunity to make a choice, that will eventually lead to two things. One, waste reduction, but also reducing the barriers to entries for people who are already out of the system or marginalized out of the system. So two other examples that we explored were modular meal selections. Currently, when you're on board, you're given a tray of food. Nobody's asking you what you need or what you want or what you do not want. And if you like something, you eat it. If you don't like it, you throw it out. And that also contributes to the statistic that we mentioned, where $4 billion worth of waste is generated at the end of the year. And so how do you give people choice to say that, hey, I don't like bread, so take it out of my tray. And then maybe, hopefully, give that bread to somebody who would want it, or compost it in a way that would eventually feed back into the system, right? And eventually implementing such a system would reduce waste for this modular meal selection. The second one is a top-up point system, which is a little bit more ambitious, but we feel like it's the best. It's one of the ways that would create choice, but also give people the opportunity to be more involved in the system. So currently, what happens is when you the in-flight meal experience is generated by just a few key players. So you have the airline industry, you have the catering services, and then they talk to each other and nobody else is involved, and maybe the procurement. But how do you involve local economies in terms of like local restaurants or local food producers to be part of the system? How do you reduce the barriers to entry in that way, shape, or form? So for us, we came up with that point system to be able to do that. Sorry, can you go back 1 second? Yeah, so yeah, you can, next one. And short-term, medium-term, long-term in terms of strategies, especially in thinking about that partnership between real estate developers, local economies, and then airports, is that we are hoping to create a network of dark kitchens that would be able to provide these customized selections that people are going to opt in for. Medium term, fostering partnerships with local food providers and restaurants, almost similar to the first one, but slightly different. And hopefully that would all support local economies. And then in the long term, you're hoping to foster or develop seamless ordering platform that integrates with the airlines and passenger management systems. Third is also logistics and distribution. We had to think about this because we need to move things within the system, especially when it comes to sourcing or to just making sure that the things are where they need to be, when they need to be. So how do you optimize logistics and distribution to ensure a seamless delivery of fresh, personalized, and locally sourced in-flight meals? And for that, we're thinking about concepts around just-in-time delivery. Not a new concept, but one that would radically transform how we source food, and then also digital platform integration. And so for that, some of the features that we're looking at were in terms of streamlining the supply chain with just-in-time delivery concepts that would ensure that people are not waiting 45 days to get their eggs, for example. And then also automated delivery and digital integration. This one we had a lot of fun with, trying to figure out what's the best and most efficient way to move things or resources in the system without having to pollute the environment or without having to rack up so much cost. And we came up with the concept of autonomous electric carts that would navigate between micro-fulfillment centers, between the distribution centers, between all the agents in the system as well. Short term, that looks like creating or integrating sustainable in-flight meal logistics at technologically advanced urban airports, and then that will create a steady flow of fresh ingredients. Medium term, looking at fully integrating the airline operations into that whole logistics as well. And then long term, looking at creating these modules or these autonomous delivery mechanisms that will be able to facilitate transportation or delivery between the key agents that we identified. And then last but not least, we also looked into or tried to reimagine what waste could look like, where we are transforming how the in-flight dining experience is not only just serving food, but also being responsible in how we manage waste, because waste is going to be generated regardless of whatever we do. And that will rely heavily on data and also try to solve for the current waste disposal challenges. And for that, some of the features that we included in the system were IoT-enabled carts, which we're going to automatically assess people's trays in flight, and then give them almost like inform people on their waste practices, right? So imagine if you took Delta and then you were served something and then somebody took your tray back. They can almost immediately tell you that, okay, you didn't eat the strawberries or you didn't eat the bread, so maybe next time you can opt out of that. After a while, you can start to generate patterns and insight that can inform not just the airline, but also the passengers themselves. We also looked into modular biodegradable packaging to make sure that whatever is created or whatever is used can also feed back into the system without harming the planet sustainable wise. And then also I mentioned circular waste management systems, so that whatever is generated, whatever waste is generated, gets back into the beginning, where we can use those to either grow more crops, or it could be used to do something else. So in terms of our strategies, we are looking at developing eco-friendly or modular packaging, and then employing data analytics to enable better insights when it comes to food and waste. Medium term, we're looking at tailoring meal offerings and giving people choice and ownership, and then also establishing closed loop recycling systems. And we are hoping that by doing all of these things, we can ultimately lower the environmental impact or environmental footprint in the aviation industry. Last but one slide. So when we did this, again, when we started this with the notion of reimagining what the in-flight meal experience is. But we did it in a way that is almost modular, and you could change how the in-flight meal experience is, or let me backtrack. So we did it in a way that is modular, such that you can replace the in-flight meal experience with, the experience that you have when you go to a hospital and you need to be catered for, or the experience that you have when you go to school and need catering services, right? So it's almost like a plug and play system. And so even though we are reimagining what the in-flight meal experience is, all these integrations that we've made can be attributed to other experiences, like what people experience in places like hospitals and schools. I know I've said a lot and I've been ranting for a while, but if for anything at all, there are certain key takeaways that we want you to leave with. There are 4 key takeaways that we want to leave you with. Our current food system is inherently flawed, no doubt about that. But the in-flight meal experience and redesigning for that is at the intersection of, the in-flight meal experience is the intersection with the most urgency to lead innovation within the food systems. And there are many signals of change within that system, within the food system, but not enough drivers to facilitate that change. And for us, we believe that the real estate, infrastructural development, most notably specialized retail, and its key functions have the greatest potential to facilitate that needed change. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're gonna move to a Q&A very quickly, and I'm just gonna invite Avani and Sani to join us. So for
Is it? Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. So thank you, Avani, Sania, Benedetta, Madi, and of course the team for the work that has been going on for almost a semester now. So if you guys have any other questions here, please, for either the in-flight meals or the embedded finance. So I have a question here from online. So people online, and then this question is for the embedded finance team. So the question is, what are the key trends in embedded finance that you see as opportunities for further development of your projects?
So as we've been working with the local economies and understanding the low trusts in these economies, we are trying to figure out through our features also what would be more inclusive for them. And that's one of the trends we've looked at, is lower trust. So that is why we're trying to tap into those local economies and smaller businesses to further uplift them and bring economic resilience to that areas. And
just adding to that, also the trend around being embedded and almost decentralized in some way. When embedded finance, we're looking at how how we can provide different institutions through integration with other services. So as we're starting to expand where insurance comes in, for example, when we're looking at insurance, we're also insuring a bag sometimes, and often it can be difficult for people to understand what that means, or that's a financial aspect of service. I think another trend that we can look at is financial literacy around even people that are banked right now. How can they better understand financial services and ways to integrate it into the daily lives?
Further adding to it is about how we are trying to understand how data could be used in these daily infrastructures, and how could we bring those nuances of data and mindfully using those data points to further make these embedded finance systems better is also a trend we're looking at right now.
My question was around how are you looking at integrating low tech solutions into, like, especially when you talked about people who are marginalized in the system. I assume like those people don't have like maybe high use smartphones. So like how are you looking at like low tech solutions for integrating them into like a financial system?
Thanks for asking that. We did some thinking around that, and some of our solutions varied from extremely tech focused to more non-traditional ways. There are a lot of systems and interventions right now that just use a brick phone, for example. So oftentimes it's texting, it's receiving a message, it's being able to bank through really simple ways of communicating and interacting with the service. So that's one way. Another way we were thinking about it is creating hubs within communities. So let's say you have a local store. Could they be equipped with the technology they need to be able to serve, let's say, a larger community of 100, 200? So being able to leverage local networks to provide access. And then lastly, we were also looking at banks. One of our ideas was banking on wheels. So could they provide infrastructure as they're moving? Kind of like that one right there, yeah. So when they go into these different communities, can they carry with them the essentials that can not only help with the digital literacy, but also financial literacy? So a couple of different angles we're trying to tackle that through.
Maybe I have a question here also from online. I mean, we have multiple questions from online. I think this question could work also for both teams. And we can start from the Inflight meal. So the question is, how could the advantage of your project or your solution be leveraged to enter new markets, industry, or sector?
I think we mentioned it at the beginning and also in the end, where even though we are solving for the Inflight meal experience, you can replace that with other experiences that people are having, because when it comes to like food and interacting with food and food systems. And I think we're also trying to be very intentional about that. So even though we are saying that, okay, we are solving for the customer experience, or you're solving for the logistics, or you're solving for waste management, that cuts across. It's not just siloed to just the in-flight meal industry or the flight industry. It's everywhere. And so some of the things that we are thinking about can be, some of the solutions that we've come up with can definitely work for other places. I don't know.
So with our solutions and systems, we are trying to tap into the trust, which is the biggest part of any market or any organization. So once we have tapped into that trust with the local economies, there are chances that in different markets and organizations, we are able to bring their voices out. And that's what the biggest part of transitioning into a cashless economy is, like trying to understand how these local members or the marginalized people can be in one community itself, not creating those imaginary divides. So
Yeah, and just to add something, we were also looking at being able to scale this for different purposes. So our focus was entirely on equity, inclusivity, accessibility, and beyond financial services that could even be looking at different demographics, different circumstances. We mentioned the refugees situation where they're treated unfairly because they lack documentation. But could we start using some of these features and plug them into a different scenario, different sector to tackle some of the same issues that we're trying to tackle through embedded finance?
Any question from the floor, please?
Thanks for the presentation. Sorry, I joined. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Sorry I joined a little bit late. Really exciting work though. I think the elephant in the room for me has to be the advent and continued pursuit of decentralized finance in the face of embedded finance for a cashless society. So I think that both applies to the idea on the right, but also the in-flight meals, because as we talk about decentralized finance, we're also talking about decentralized ledgers, which is kind of the undercurrent that would support just-in-time delivery for meals. So I'm wondering how we might contend with those ongoing trends in the face of what can we do today. So an example would be if community banking on the right or embedded finance for cashless society, if I switch out community banking for Chase Bank, given their current circumstances, would they be the ideal host for this implementation, or would you need to invent an entirely new organization in order to deploy the idea? So thinking about who hosts the idea, but also do you need an existing host or should you create a new one given the technology trends?
Something that needs to think about. Jonah?
I think that's interesting to think of. Throughout this project, we worked with Credit Corp as our partner, so we were starting to envision the realities of Peru and their services and how we can kind of bridge that gap between this idealistic future we were painting. So I think there are aspects of these features that could require a whole new organization or a host, but there are also aspects where current services could be expanded with the limitations that exist and could be used by, some of them could be used by Chase, let's say, but maybe some of them need new services. So I think the way we worked around it was create a bunch of features and archetypes and these potential futures and see how different aspects could pull in into different hosts and organizations. I hope that answers it. Yeah.
For the in-flight meal experience as well, so our approach was also similar but slightly different. So we created these like features and then tried to figure out who is the best organization or entity to take ownership of some of the ideas that we've had or we've generated or created, and what are the flaws of doing that, or what are the upsides of doing that, right? I don't think we did that for all the solutions. So it's very hard to pinpoint exactly like these are who owns what. But we also had a partner or client that we worked with, which was the Invert, and we also tried to almost like, how do I even explain? So almost like try to push forward solutions with them in mind in some sense, but also try to solve for equity and sustainability within the whole like food system. With regards to the technologies, it's one of the questions that we have, like we haven't really fully answered in terms of who owns that aspect of like logistics and distribution. Who's going to do it? Would it be the Invert, or would it be, we're talking about the government creating infrastructures that can be like the platform or the foundation for other people to create systems on. And there's upsides and downsides to doing that. I don't think we need to definitely do that work, but I don't have an answer to you. But yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And if we had more time to do this work, it would definitely be the next stage of that.
And honestly, this question has been raised this whole semester. Like, who's gonna own this data? Because we've been pushing like data is like, we're all moving towards leveraging data. But at the end of the day, we don't know who's gonna own that data or who's willing to take ownership of that data. So it's still in the unknown for us right now.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up to the question is more, and this is, I was sharing with y'all earlier, this isn't me critiquing, it's me conversing. So the follow-up is that when I think about investable infrastructure, I think about very literally, where does the intellectual property lie in the idea? Is it truly a technology innovation, which would make it sort of in theory, a people-based investment strategy? Or is it a territorial innovation, which is like, hey, this is a new way of using this property, this land, this natural resource, which would be, in my opinion, a place-based investment strategy. And once we get to the actual like financial due diligence, you have to, and we all know this, we have to decide, hey, this is the thing that is everything else is lynching upon, otherwise there is no idea.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I asked, just to start the conversation.
Yeah.
If I add a quick comment on that, I think it's important that we bring exactly this discussion to one of the core things that we discussed throughout the entire semester, which is this a public infrastructure or a private platform?
Yeah.
So this distinction between those challenges that we are facing now, where we used to have very clear what was the type of public infrastructure, like cash.
Yeah.
It's government printing money, okay? That's a public infrastructure, that's very clear, okay? When we have Venmo, this is a private platform that is replacing cash and becoming a new way of doing financial transactions. So that's an example, like in Brazil, Pix has replaced the cash. So it's government providing that public infrastructure. In the United States, this is banks providing that infrastructure. It's a public good, but private entities providing that public good. So I think your question is excellent because it exactly brings the issues of who is investing, who is regulating, who is managing, and if crises emerge, who is responsible? So there are several questions when we are in these transitions, but what we try to address is exactly the fact that regardless if we like it or not, this is happening. We are transitioning to a cashless society. And those are the challenges that we're going to be facing moving forward. So excellent point, and appreciate.
I think a lot of implementation from both groups, but I was just sitting and imagining a scenario where there's like an intersection between both infrastructures or both solutions, where we're trying to restore dignity, especially for the unbanked and marginalized communities, because they're in situations where they're cash poor, or in scenarios where they can't afford much, but also diverting waste in such a way that they're restoring dignity in a way where they can purchase food that would otherwise go to waste, and like airlines, they come and go different places. They can repurpose that food where people in some of these communities can buy food for cheaper through some of these platforms and avoid waste through integration between both solutions. It's not really a question, but
That's really good.
Really interesting. Nafisa shaking her head so strongly because, like, I think she's one of the people who really pushes for equity when it comes to like involving people and money. So one of the solutions that came up, especially for Inflight meals, was how do we create avenues where people who, in your words, are cash poor participate in the system. And so integrating with things like SNAP and EBT. So SNAP, sorry, I'm not American, so I'm going to butcher this, but like SNAP is where people who don't necessarily have enough cash to be able to afford basic amenities like food can be able to use these points or this money to purchase food. So how do you integrate such an already existing infrastructure provided by the government and integrate it into the whole like ecosystem when it comes to like food, right? And give people more access in there. it's a very, very valid point, especially when we talk about, again, we define sustainability as people, profit, planet. The people aspect of that is where that lives in that system. So yeah, very valid.
We have time for one more question from the floor, and I have another question from online. So I could start with the question, and again, it's more. I'm trying to rephrase the question in a way that would also would work for both teams. I mean, the questions, which is actually two questions that I'm putting together. It's basically that there are some uniqueness to the solutions that you guys have been. And there are challenges and there are opportunities that you're mapping within each project. So the question is compared, like if we're talking about embedded finance, the solutions that has been offered or the archetypes that has been offered compared to the traditional financial products and services that already exist, what is the new archetype that has been proposed is offering rather than comparing that to the traditional offering that already exists. That's one. And if I want to rephrase that to also the Inflight meals, will be something related to offerings being at the business class versus offering being at the economy class. Your offer or your archetype, how is it different as well from the existing offering that already exists? So and this would maybe wrap up our conversation for today.
I think the way we were envisioning all of this is that current traditional financial services aren't catered to these communities or the unbanked population. It's really only pushing and helping the privileged move further. And where we are seeing the difference is not only do we want to bring in communities and make sure they're able to grow financially, but we also want to introduce the sense of trust and confidence. Right now, banking systems are facing issues in marginalized communities where there's a trust issue, where communities don't trust these institutions. So we're hoping to not only provide services that meet the needs and preferences of the community, but make sure we're building a sense of trust and relationship with the communities that we're trying to serve. I think another aspect to this is also economic resilience. So not only are we seeing banks as institutions that provide services, but we also are looking at them as a way to build communities, something that's more than just transactional, to really more holistic in the sense where they become an embedded part of the community and help uplift them and empower them. That's anything.
The difference between the classes?
Well, the offering that already exists, and when I'm thinking of an example of business class versus economy class, and the offering that already now exists, how different your archetypes are being tackling that. So the new offering that you're suggesting or proposing versus the existing one.
Yeah. I mean, one of the features that we did consider was, especially when it comes to the customer experience, is that we notice that some people don't really care so much about like where they sit on the plane. The plane is going to arrive anyways, right? And that one destination. But the kind of food and the kind of experience that you have when it comes to like that whole in-flight meal experience is very different for where you sit. So it's almost like the food that you're eating on the flight is tied to the class, right? So business class is very different from economy class. But some people care more about the kind of food that they're eating and what they're ingesting. Some would choose to opt out because they're not getting the right, fresh, quality produce that they're looking out for. And so one of our features, especially when the point system that we mentioned, was that how do you give people choice? How do you give them? I think that's also one of the difference between the classes, right? How do you take away the class aspect of food and then give people ownership? And give people choice so that they can have the experience that they want regardless of wherever they sit. I think that would be one of the biggest difference. I know there are other like features that we introduced. I don't know if you want to
I mean, one of the other features that we're trying to introduce that I think is basically like not really ending the class system in a plane, but it's more like, yeah, like what Benedicta said, is like giving everybody the choice to be able to choose, or giving them the power to choose what they're ingesting or what they're actually eating in the plane. Because yeah, the difference in classes, plane classes, is very different, and like the experience you get from beginning to end for both classes are very different. And yeah, it's just basically like how do we not level out the playing field, but give the same not the same experience, but give them equally nice experiences throughout their whole journey, regardless of their plane ticket.
Thank you. Very well said, and thank you, guys, for a very well thought out work throughout the whole semester. And obviously there is a lot to unpack in each project. So uh, so for so what we're doing now, moving forward, is we are having both projects on our website. We're uploading them next week on sustainablesolutions.design. So please, for people online, feel free to access our website to learn more and see the full report for each project. And with that, I would love to end this by giving a round of applause for both.
So we have food outside?
Yes, should be.
We had some food outside. So